He was just a puppy, no more than 5 months old, curled up in the dirt outside a broken gate, his breath shallow, his fur wet with sweat and poison. Someone had left him there to die, but they didn't count on who would find him. A lonely mechanic, a man who had already lost too much, and a backyard that was supposed to be empty suddenly held a second chance. What came next? It didn't just save a life. It uncovered a truth darker than anyone imagined. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe even the smallest life deserves to be fought for, hit that subscribe button. Because this story, it'll break your heart and rebuild it. August in rural Kentucky didn't whisper. It pressed. It pressed against your skin with damp fingers, crawled into the folds of your clothes, and settled heavy on your breath. The morning air was already too thick for comfort, flavored with rust from the shed roof and the sweet rot of fallen fruit beneath the plum tree out back. A cicada screeched from somewhere nearby, loud and long, like something breaking. Tommy Granger, 47, wiped a grimy hand across his brow, smearing sweat and grease across already weathered skin. He stood in the backyard of the house his parents left behind, half paint, half peeling, with gutters that sagged like tired shoulders. Since the auto shop shut down 2 months ago, he'd been mostly fixing whatever junk people left near his gate, trying to stretch his last few dollars into meals. But things were thinning out. The fridge, the wallet, his patience, his face, angular and deeply lined, was the kind of face that used to smile easier before life stopped giving him reasons. A gray stubble clung to his jaw, unshaved for days. He hadn't seen his daughter in 3 years. He hadn't spoken to a friend in almost as long. He was bent over an old water pump when he heard it. A sound like breath, but broken. Weak. Barely there. Tommy froze. He turned toward the far corner of the yard, where the fence leaned inward and weeds had grown tall enough to hide anything smaller than a bicycle. And there, beneath the drooping limbs of an overgrown rosebush, was a mound of fur. At first, it didn't register. Could have been a raccoon. Could have been trash. Then it twitched. He dropped his wrench. Moving fast, faster than he'd moved in weeks, Tommy knelt beside the figure, a young dog. No more than 5 months by the look of it. Golden retriever. Or some mix close enough. Its fur, once likely thick and shining, was now dirty, matted, and sticking in clumps to its ribs. Its legs were sprawled awkwardly. The eyes, half open, were unfocused. Foam clung to the corners of its mouth. Tommy reached out, touched its side. The breath was there, but shallow, wet, slipping. "Hey," he whispered, voice unsteady. "Hey, come on now." The dog didn't respond. But it didn't pull away either. He didn't ask who it belonged to. He didn't ask why it was here. All he saw was that it was dying, and dying in his yard. Tommy scooped the pup up in both arms. It was lighter than it should have been. Bones and silence. Inside, he laid the pup on an old towel in the passenger seat of his truck, slammed the door shut, and reached for his phone with shaking fingers. He dialed the first vet clinic that came up in his old contacts list. The one in Langford, 10 minutes away. A voice answered. Young, clear, professional. "Yes, emergency," Tommy said. "Found a puppy. He's poisoned or something. Barely breathing. I'm bringing him now." There was a pause. "Do you have a payment method ready, sir?" "What?" "We require an upfront emergency fee of $250 before treatment." "I don't have that," he said quietly. "Then I'm very sorry," the voice said. "We cannot accept walk-in cases without deposit. It's our policy." Tommy hung up. He clenched the steering wheel, looked at the pup. Its breath fluttered once, then again, thin as paper. He started the engine. As he turned the truck onto the road, something at the gate caught his eye. A woman, maybe in her early 30s, stood by the mailbox, pinning a flyer to the fence with a strip of blue tape. She turned at the sound of his truck, tall, slender, pale arms freckled by sun. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a loose braid that had started to come undone in the heat. Her face was open and alert, not soft, but kind. She wore a faded t-shirt that read, "Rescue Kentucky Hearts," above the silhouette of a dog and cat, and held a stack of papers in one hand. Their eyes met. "I'm from the rescue shelter," she began. "We're looking for—" "Not a good time," Tommy said, rolling his window partway down. She glanced at the passenger seat where the puppy lay on the towel, unmoving. Oh no, she breathed. I'm heading to a clinic. Langford won't help if you don't have cash, she said quickly. Try Greenwood. 15 minutes out. They're not kind, but they'll look. Tommy nodded once, rolled the window back up. As he pulled away, she called after him, not shouting, just enough to carry. Tell them Becca sent you. Sometimes that helps. Greenwood Animal Hospital was newer, larger, cleaner, and colder. The air conditioning hit him like a wall as he pushed through the doors with the pup in his arms. His shirt clung to his back, soaked in sweat. The pup's head rolled limply against his elbow. The receptionist looked up from her screen. Blonde, mid-40s, eyes like frost. Emergency? She asked. Yes, golden retriever pup. Poisoned or something. It's bad. She didn't stand. Do you have funds to cover treatment? I know, I lost my job. He's dying. She didn't blink. I'm very sorry, sir. We cannot proceed without payment or proof of rescue sponsorship. Becca, someone named Becca from the shelter, she told me. She's a volunteer, not authorized for payment. I'm sorry. Tommy looked down at the small body in his arms, still breathing, barely, still warm. He turned, walked out. The air outside felt hotter now, cruel. He sat in the truck, door open, the cicadas still screaming from the trees. He looked at the road. No more names came to mind. No more clinics. No more time. He looked at the dog again. The chest still rose, once, twice, then still. Tommy placed his hand gently against the pup's side. A breath. One more, but slower now. He leaned back in the seat, eyes fixed on the horizon. He didn't know where else to go, what else to try. He didn't pray, but he waited. For something. Anything. A miracle? Was there still one left for a broke man and a dying dog? The light above the door flickered once, then went out completely. Tommy sat stiffly in the cracked vinyl chair of the Greenwood Clinic's emergency porch, the dying puppy still swaddled in the damp towel on his lap. He hadn't moved in 10 minutes. The engine of his truck ticked as it cooled, and a wasp batted lazily against the window. In his chest, the tightness hadn't eased. He didn't know how much longer the dog could hold on, but he couldn't just sit and watch him die. There had been one more name, one more shot. And if it hadn't been for the girl at the gate, Becca, she said, he wouldn't even have that. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a gas receipt, flipped it over, and scrawled the name of the shelter she mentioned. Then he made the call. A new voice answered, older, slower. Stone Creek Animal Rescue, Dr. David speaking. Sir, I was told, Becca said you might be able to help. Tommy's voice cracked. I found a poisoned dog, pup, barely alive, no money. 2 clinics already turned me away. There was a pause on the line, a sigh, not of annoyance, but of familiarity. Where are you? By Greenwood, about 20 out. Bring him, I'll be waiting. Stone Creek didn't look like much. A squat brick building nestled behind a rundown fire station, with chipped signage and a door that stuck when pushed. But inside, the air was cool and clean. The faint scent of antiseptic floated above the smell of hay and fur. Dr. David Ashford was already by the exam table. He was 70 if he was a day, with thin white hair tied at the back of his neck and sun-darkened skin that looked carved from dry leather. His eyes, sharp behind thick glasses, flicked up as Tommy entered, then immediately dropped to the bundle in his arms. Set him here, he said gently, motioning to the table. Tommy obeyed. David moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been doing this his entire life. He unwrapped the towel slowly, his weathered fingers tracing over the pup's limbs, lifting the lip to examine the gums, placing 2 fingers against the side of the neck. What's his name? Tommy hesitated. Bailey. David gave a brief nod, like the name had weight. He's lucky. You brought him just in time. Lucky? Tommy rasped. 2 places wouldn't touch him. Said no money, no dog. David's face didn't change. This world's gotten real good at measuring life in invoices. Is there anything you can do? I already am, he replied simply. This isn't the first poisoned dog I've seen. But this particular reaction, this isn't backyard rat poison. He paused, drawing a vial of dark fluid from a drawer and holding it up to the light. This is commercial grade. Could be one of 2 compounds, either of which should never be in a residential area. This one's been used before, in organized dog fighting. Tommy's brow furrowed. What? David was already preparing an injection, fingers moving steadily. They use it to test pain thresholds, or to silence dogs they don't want anymore. A slow, ugly way out. A lump formed in Tommy's throat as he watched Bailey's side rise and fall. You think someone meant for this to happen? I think someone didn't expect him to live this long. While Bailey was stabilized and monitored in the back room, Tommy sat in the lobby, surrounded by faded posters about spaying, heartworms, and forgotten pets. A radio played quietly near the front desk, old country tunes from a scratchy speaker. The clinic's assistant shuffled in and out. Michael, barely 20, thin as a fence post, and always fidgeting with the drawstring of his hoodie. His hair fell into his eyes, and he smelled faintly of cheap cologne and fryer grease. Tommy didn't pay him much attention until he noticed the kid slipping into the storage hallway with a phone pressed to his ear. Tommy might not have been anyone's idea of quick these days, but years under hoods and listening to engines had trained his ear for things not meant to be heard. The hallway echoed. Michael's voice, low, urgent. I don't know how he made it to Stone Creek. No, I didn't say anything. He's still here, though, breathing. Yeah, just say when. Tommy leaned forward slightly. The kid reappeared a minute later, smile pasted on like plastic. He passed behind the desk without a glance. Tommy's gut twisted. Later that afternoon, Becca showed up. She parked a faded blue Subaru behind Tommy's truck, a bag of dog food under one arm, and a cardboard tray with 2 to-go cups in the other. I figured you'd still be here, she said gently. Thought you might need something. Tommy didn't stand. He was hunched in the corner chair, hands clasped, boots mud-streaked and silent. Becca set the coffee down and sat across from him. Up close, she looked younger than before, maybe 34, though her posture held an edge of weariness, like she'd carried too many things for too long. Her shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbow, showing strong forearms, sun-freckled, no jewelry. Her fingernails were trimmed short. Her eyes were soft but alert, like someone used to reading tension in others. She didn't speak for a moment. Let the silence settle. Then, that's not the first dog left poisoned in someone's yard around here, but most don't survive long enough to get a name. Tommy finally looked up. You see a lot of this? I'm a volunteer. Been doing it since my sister's dog was stolen 3 years ago. Never got him back. But I found 2 others because I kept looking. He nodded slowly. I didn't plan to take him in. Just didn't seem right to let him die there. Maybe that's enough for now. They sat for a while. She asked about Bailey, how he'd found him. Tommy told her, hesitantly, about the bush, the foam, the drive, the doors slammed in his face. He didn't mention the job he lost, or the daughter who hadn't called in 2 years, but he didn't need to. She saw it anyway. Becca stood eventually. He's lucky you found him, lucky you stayed. I'm not much good for anything else, he said. She smiled sadly. Maybe you're better at saving lives than fixing machines. That evening, David stepped into the waiting room with a slow exhale. He's stable, weak, but holding on. We flushed most of the toxin and started hydration. If he makes it through the night, he has a real shot. Tommy swallowed hard. Thank you. David just nodded. Don't thank me yet. Keep your eyes open. He turned toward the desk. There's interest in this dog, and not the good kind. Tommy looked toward the hallway, the place where Michael had made that call. His jaw set. He sat down beside the kennel where Bailey now lay, curled under a blanket, his breathing slow but no longer gasping. One paw twitched in sleep. The tail moved once. The lights above flickered again. And somewhere deep inside Tommy Granger, something long dormant stirred. Not fear, not grief, but a quiet, growing sense of responsibility. The next morning brought no dramatic sunrise, no golden light streaming through the curtains, just a dull gray that seemed to soak the air and settle on the skin like ash. A slow drizzle coated the windshield of Tommy's truck as he pulled into the gravel driveway behind his house. Stone Creek Clinic had kept Bailey overnight, and though he was far from out of danger, Dr. David had given a reluctant nod when Tommy asked to bring him home under the promise of strict instructions. Now, Bailey lay curled in a folded blanket on the passenger seat, still thin, still trembling occasionally, but breathing with more rhythm. His eyes opened from time to time, warily, sluggishly. and he would look up at Tommy with a blankness that made the older man's chest ache. Tommy carried him into the house as carefully as if he were made of glass. The interior was cold and smelled faintly of dust and motor oil. He hadn't cleaned in weeks, maybe months. He laid Bailey on an old Afghan quilt he found in the back closet, the one his wife used to drape over the couch when she watched TV in the afternoons. He tucked the corners gently around the pup. Bailey made no sound. Tommy stared down at him for a long moment, hands on hips, unsure of what came next. There was food, canned chicken and rice that Becca had brought, but Bailey wouldn't eat on his own. The vet had instructed Tommy to use a plastic syringe to push broth into his mouth, if needed. He sat cross-legged by the quilt and did exactly that. Slowly, carefully. Bailey accepted it. He didn't resist, but neither did he engage. It was like feeding something that hadn't quite decided to keep living. Later, Tommy opened a notepad Becca had slipped into the supply bag. On the first page she'd written, "Try this, just a few words a day for both of you." He frowned at the page. Tommy had never journaled a single day in his life. His handwriting was jagged, uneven, full of hesitation. But after a long silence, he picked up a pen and wrote, "Day 1, he's still here. I didn't expect that. I don't know what I'm doing, but I don't think he wants to die." He closed the notebook and set it aside. Bailey stirred slightly, then startled when the furnace kicked on. The sudden click of metal expanding was enough to make him lurch, his paws clawing at the edge of the blanket before curling tight again, his tail tucked under his belly. Tommy didn't move, just watched. It wasn't the first time that day Bailey reacted to a sound like that. Earlier, when Tommy had closed the door too quickly, the pup had bolted behind the table. When a neighbor's truck backfired down the road, Bailey shook for 15 minutes straight. It wasn't normal fear, it was something deeper, learned. Tommy exhaled slowly. "What did they do to you, boy?" That evening, Becca returned. She knocked softly, waited, then let herself in when he called out. Her boots tracked a bit of mud onto the tile, but she noticed and took them off without comment. She wore a green windbreaker and a faded ball cap pulled low. Her cheeks were red from the cold, but her smile came easy when she saw Bailey lying on the floor. "He's better," she said gently. "Better than dying?" Tommy replied. She knelt beside the pup, stroked his head. Bailey didn't shy away this time. "He remembers you," Tommy added. Becca smiled. "Dogs are good at remembering kindness, even if it was just for a second." Tommy stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. He's scared of everything. Doors, sounds, boots, me sometimes. She glanced up at him. "You think he was abused?" "I know that look. Same as a guy I worked with once. Had a wife that used to hit him. He'd flinch every time someone stood too fast." They were quiet for a moment. Then Tommy added, "I gave him a name. Bailey." Becca nodded, eyes warm. "It suits him. Gentle." "I don't know what made me say it," Tommy muttered. "Just came out." She didn't press, just watched Bailey breathe for a while. Then she asked, "Did you write anything?" Tommy hesitated, then went to the table, retrieved the notepad, and handed it to her without a word. She read the single entry and handed it back. "That's more than some people say in a week." He gave a short laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You ever write stuff like that?" he asked. "I used to," she said, "before things got heavy." He looked at her, eyebrows raised slightly. "I was a teacher," she explained, "before I volunteered full-time. I left after I saw one of the aides hitting a special needs student behind a door. Reported it. They told me I overreacted, said I was disruptive to the workplace. So I walked." Tommy said nothing, but there was a small shift in his expression, the barest tilt of empathy. She rose slowly. "I should let you rest. Bailey needs quiet. So do you." At the door she paused. "Write again tomorrow, even if it's just one word." That night, the wind howled through the gutters. Bailey slept in fits, sometimes waking to stare blankly at the shadows on the wall. Tommy didn't sleep much either. He sat on the couch, the notepad in his lap, watching the pup breathe, listening for every odd noise. In the dark, his mind wandered back. His wife's name had been Lila, soft-spoken, dark-haired, with hands always busy, gardening, sewing, baking. She died 7 winters ago, a quiet illness that arrived without fanfare and took her piece by piece. He hadn't known how to grieve, so he just worked. drank a little, lost touch with his daughter. By the time he realized he was alone, it had already become normal. He looked over at Bailey. Small, trembling, trusting him anyway. He picked up the pen. Day 2. He's still afraid. But he looked at me today. Really looked. I forgot what that felt like. It was just past 2 in the morning when Tommy first noticed the way Bailey stared into the darkness. The living room was dimly lit by a single lamp in the corner, casting a warm amber glow over the faded furniture and scuffed floorboards. Bailey lay near the back door, chin resting on his paws, but his eyes, those cautious, deep brown eyes, were fixed firmly on the backyard. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't even blinking. Tommy, sitting on the couch with a cup of black coffee cooling in his hand, followed the dog's gaze. There was nothing but the shadows of the trees swaying in the wind and the sagging fence at the far edge of the property. Still, something felt off. The air was too still, the silence too tight. Bailey's ears twitched. A low sound, less than a growl, hummed in his throat, barely audible. Tommy leaned forward, gently set his mug down, and stood. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. Bailey didn't move, just kept watching. Tommy walked slowly to the back door. The porch light had burned out days ago, and he hadn't gotten around to replacing it. Through the glass pane, he could just barely make out the faint line of the grass, the shape of the tree stump near the corner. Then he saw it. Pressed faintly into the mud near the back steps, half dried and distorted, was a footprint. A man's, larger than his own. Treaded boots, not fresh, but not old either. He opened the door, stepped out into the night. The air bit at his skin, damp and cool with early frost. The print was clearer outside than it had been through the glass. One, then another, leading toward the back fence and stopping, not returning. No animal made those. Tommy's heart kicked against his ribs. He turned slowly, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved. Still, that crawling sensation under his skin didn't fade. Inside, Bailey had stood, not barking, not growling, just watching Tommy, tense and silent, like a sentry. Tommy walked back in, locked the door, then checked the windows one by one. He slept with a wrench beside his bed that night. Becca returned the next afternoon, her arms full of fresh supplies, a small bag of kibble, a bottle of vitamin drops, and a packet of syringes from the shelter. Her ponytail was damp from rain, her raincoat spotted with dried mud at the hem. She knocked, but Tommy had already opened the door before her hand touched it. "You okay?" she asked, brows furrowed. "You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't," he replied. They sat at the kitchen table, the supplies spread between them. Bailey was asleep in the other room, curled against the couch, breathing steady, but still occasionally twitching in his sleep. "There were footprints," Tommy said, quiet but firm. "By the back fence. Someone was there last night." Becca looked up, startled. "Are you sure?" "Big, boots, fresh enough. Didn't come from inside, just there." She exhaled, her fingers wrapping around the warm ceramic of the mug he'd handed her. Then, after a long silence, she said, "It happened to me once." Tommy didn't speak. "It was 5 years ago," she continued. "I lived alone in this little house on Maple Grove. One night, I woke up to my front door open and muddy footprints in the hallway. Nothing was taken, but I still remember how that felt. Like someone had reached inside my ribs and squeezed." Tommy nodded slowly. "I didn't think I could still be scared like that. Not after everything. But last night, I just kept thinking, what if they came for him?" Becca's face tightened. "Bailey? He wasn't dumped by accident, not with what the vet said. If someone wants him back, not for good reasons. We need to report it." "To who?" Tommy scoffed. "Sheriff barely answers for real crimes. What am I going to say? My dog stared into the dark, and I found a boot print?" She didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small trail cam. "Then, we do it our way. Motion activated, night vision. Just needs to be tied to a post or tree." He looked at her, genuinely surprised. "Shelter's been using them for months now. Helps catch people dumping animals in ditches. We've even caught one guy running an illegal breeder ring." Tommy took the camera, turned it over in his hands. "You always carry this kind of stuff?" Becca smiled faintly. "Only when I think I'll need it." Together they stepped outside and tied the camera to the lowest branch of the tree that overlooked the yard. The drizzle had cleared, leaving the ground soft, the sky a muted steel. As they worked, Tommy caught himself glancing at her, noticing how she wiped her hands carefully after handling the strap, how she moved with quiet precision, unhurried, like someone used to being prepared for the worst. When they went back inside, Bailey had woken and was watching them from the rug. His tail wagged once. Tommy knelt beside him. Still on edge? Bailey licked his wrist, then rested his chin on Tommy's knee. That night, Tommy wrote again. Day 3. I saw his eyes in the dark. He wasn't afraid of the yard. He was afraid of what he remembered from places like it. The sky had turned copper by early evening, the sun bleeding through the thinned clouds like it was struggling to stay visible. The wind carried the scent of rain, old wood, and something sour, like rusting wire. Tommy was in the backyard, raking leaves near the base of the maple tree, eyes darting occasionally to the trail camera strapped above. It had been 3 nights since they installed it, and so far, nothing out of the ordinary had appeared. Bailey, still frail but walking more each day, lay in a patch of late light near the porch, his eyes half-lidded and watchful. He'd been more alert since the footprint, sticking closer to Tommy, reacting strongly to loud noises but recovering quicker. His coat was still thin along the spine, a dull gold matted in places, but a faint gleam had returned beneath the grime, like the suggestion of life rather than the surrender of it. Tommy wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of one calloused hand, glanced again at the tree. He was debating whether to reposition the camera when he saw it, a shape, partly buried beneath fallen leaves, just past the reach of the porch light's glow. He stepped forward, boots crunching soft earth. Kneeling slowly, he brushed away the leaves. It was a cage, an old bird cage, small, rusted, and twisted at the latch. The bars had been bent outward in places. Inside was a Ziploc bag. His stomach turned even before he picked it up. He opened the bag with shaking fingers. Inside, there was a Polaroid photograph, grainy but unmistakable. Bailey, weeks younger, chained to a metal pole, his muzzle taped shut, his eyes wild and terrified. And beneath the photo, scrawled in thick black marker on a torn index card, were 4 words. You took what's ours. Tommy stared, a cold sweat crawling down his neck. He looked toward the woods. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. Inside, he locked every door and window, then checked them twice. Bailey followed him, pacing more than usual, unsettled. Tommy didn't show him the photo. He didn't need to. He called the sheriff's office. The man who picked up was Deputy Carl Underwood, a lean figure in his early 40s with a slightly nasal drawl and a reputation for doing exactly as much as his salary required. Tommy had known Carl since high school. He was the kind of guy who had coasted through life with an easy grin and low ambition. Sounds like a prank, Carl said over the phone. You know how kids get bored out there? Halloween's coming up. Carl, this ain't a prank, Tommy said, voice low. They knew his name. They had a photo. Where would someone get that? There was a pause, the kind of pause that spoke more of inconvenience than concern. You still got the dog? I do. You sure you didn't steal him from someone? That was enough. Tommy ended the call without another word. The next morning, Becca arrived in jeans and a navy hoodie with the shelter logo stitched on the sleeve. Her hair was pulled back into a bun, her expression unreadable until she saw Tommy's face. You look like someone gutted your engine, she said carefully. He handed her the Ziploc bag. She stared at the photo, jaw tightening. Where did you find this? Near the tree. I'd say it was tossed over last night. I didn't hear a thing. Becca set the bag down and folded her arms. That's not just intimidation. That's a message. Organized. They called the dog theirs. They always do, she muttered. When Tommy looked up, her eyes had shifted, harder than he'd ever seen. I think it's time you saw something. She sat him down at his kitchen table and pulled out her phone. After a few taps, she opened a private online forum, Fight Watchers, a group of volunteers, whistleblowers, and ex-enforcement officers who tracked dogfighting operations across the country. The forum wasn't public, but Becca had been part of it since her sister's dog had been stolen years ago. She hadn't found him, but she'd found others. She searched for Kentucky, Shepherd, Limping, Young. 3 results came up. One post stood out. A user named Doglight6 had uploaded a blurry screenshot from what looked like a surveillance camera. A dog, young, golden, chained to a wall. Below the image, the user had written, "Seen this pup in West Corridor, labeled B19. Small for his age, not responding to food. May not last long." Tommy's hands curled into fists. Becca clicked another link. A list of known drop sites and dumping zones. One matched his town, an empty stretch near a logging road just a mile from where he'd found Bailey. "They use old cages, sometimes crates, sometimes—" She gestured to the photo. "Bird cages, apparently. Whatever sends a message." Tommy stared at the screen. How long have they been doing this? Long enough, but they move fast. Temporary setups, underground. Very few get caught. He looked at Bailey, asleep now on the couch, one paw twitching as if still trying to run. "I should have done more," he said. "You're doing more now," she replied. "Most people would have turned him in. You didn't." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he stood, walked to the window, stared out toward the fence. "They're not finished," he said softly. "No," she said, "but neither are we." The night smelled like copper and cold dust. Wind pressed hard against the windows, lifting loose shingles and dragging dry leaves in frantic circles across the yard. Tommy sat at the kitchen table, one hand wrapped around a cup of instant coffee gone lukewarm, the other resting on Bailey's back as the dog lay curled at his feet. Bailey had grown more restless in recent days, sensing what even Tommy couldn't always articulate, a pressure, an electricity in the air, as if something was waiting just beyond the tree line. It was nearing midnight when the motion light at the back porch flicked on. Bailey's ears perked up. He rose slowly, stiff but alert, head tilted toward the back door. Tommy stood too, grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and his father's old baseball bat from beside the fridge. He clicked off the lamp and peered out through the side of the curtain. Nothing moved, just the rustle of wind-tossed grass, the ghost sway of branches. He opened the door slowly. Bailey stepped out first, his body low to the ground, silent. Tommy followed, boots soft on the dirt. The flashlight's beam cut through the dark, illuminating the maple tree, the shed, the empty dog bowl on the porch. Then the gunshot rang out, sharp, fast, and close, too close. Bark exploded from the trunk beside him, splinters flying into the wind. Bailey yelped and scrambled behind the shed. Tommy hit the ground hard, his shoulder slamming into the porch steps, coffee still scalding his shirt. He scrambled, crawling on elbows to get behind the trash bins. His heart pounded in his ears. Another shot. This one missed entirely, somewhere into the trees. Then silence. Whoever it was, they didn't stay to finish it. Bailey crept back out, low and trembling, but unharmed. Tommy reached out, pulled him in close. His breath came shallow, but not from fear, from fury. He waited there in the cold, weapon clutched tight, until his hands stopped shaking. Morning light felt false, too bright for what had happened. Tommy examined the maple tree again, eyes tracing the fresh scar on its trunk. Embedded in the bark, partially flattened, was a bullet. He pried it out carefully, placed it on the counter beside his empty mug. That's when he saw it, half buried near the base of the tree, a torn piece of cloth, deep gray, thick and weather-resistant. Military surplus, maybe? Stenciled across one edge, faint but visible, were the letters CC. Tommy recognized it instantly. Crimson collar. He pocketed the cloth, grabbed his jacket, and dialed Becca. They met at the edge of town, at a gas station that looked abandoned even when open. Becca climbed out of her car with her hair tied back in a messy bun, wearing a canvas vest filled with folded pamphlets and pens. She looked tired, deep shadows under her eyes, but alert. The kind of alert people learn after enough years living near danger. "You okay?" she asked first. "Someone fired 2 shots at my house last night," Tommy replied. "I found this." He handed her the cloth. Her face changed immediately, pale, sharp. "This is real now. It wasn't before. Not like this." Becca looked at the scrap again. "There's someone I want you to meet." They drove an hour north to the outskirts of an industrial town called Warren Hollow. The roads narrowed, houses became older, fewer. Eventually they pulled up to a small red brick house with bars on the windows and a satellite dish covered in rust. Wind chimes made from old dog tags jingled on the porch. A man opened the door before they even knocked. He was in his 60s, stocky, bald with a tight gray beard, wearing a sheriff's department sweatshirt, faded by time. His name was Ralph Murdoch, and he had the kind of face that had seen far too much and kept all of it inside. Deep lines ran along the corners of his eyes, and his left shoulder sloped slightly from an injury that never quite healed. "You're the one with the dog?" he asked Tommy. "I am." "You're also the one someone tried to kill last night." He stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, Ralph's living room was part archive, part armory. Stacks of file boxes lined the back wall. A corkboard hung with strings and photos stood in one corner. An old rifle was disassembled on the coffee table, being cleaned with mechanical patience. "Crimson Collar," Ralph began, "used to run this state like a ghost, never stayed long. Barns, trailers, even churches. Wherever people wouldn't look twice. We took one ring down 3 years ago. Thought we'd buried it." Tommy held up the cloth. "They're back?" Ralph took it, examined the texture. "Or someone's using their name." "And Bailey?" Becca asked. "I remember that pup, or one like him, rescued from a burn site after a fight broke out. Most of them didn't survive the fire. One slipped away. We couldn't find him." Tommy sat forward. "He was labeled B-19. Ralph nodded slowly. "That sounds right." "What does that mean?" "Batch, shipment, fight number. Doesn't matter. They saw him as a tool, not a life." Ralph stood, walked over to the corkboard, pulled down a photo, grainy, surveillance style. It showed a man standing beside a truck, a large German shepherd chained in the back. "This man's name is Dean Klasko," Ralph said. "Former dog trainer turned underground organizer. He disappeared after the fire. Word is he's been trying to restart what was lost. If he found out B-19 survived, he'd want him back," Tommy finished. "Or dead," Ralph said bluntly. Becca stiffened. "What can we do?" Ralph's eyes met Tommy's. "You protect him. You stay aware. And you don't trust anyone who shows up asking questions." He handed Tommy a small card. "I'm off duty, technically retired, but I never stopped watching. Call me if anything moves." That night, Tommy sat by the window, Bailey lying beside him, ears twitching in his sleep. The wind had calmed, but Tommy's mind hadn't. He held the bullet in one hand, the piece of cloth in the other. He looked at Bailey, scarred, silent, breathing. Then he picked up the notepad. Day 4. They fired a bullet at my house, but they missed. He didn't flinch, he just waited. He trusts me to fight back. I don't know how to be brave, but I think I'm learning. The morning sun hung low over Fairmill, casting long orange slats through the blinds of Tommy's trailer. Dust floated lazily in the golden light, but Tommy was already dressed. Gray flannel, worn jeans, boots laced tight. Bailey sat beside him, his eyes following every movement with silent trust. The night had been uneventful, but unease coiled in Tommy's gut like a slow burn, and Ralph's warning still echoed in his ears. A single name had returned to him as he lay awake before dawn: Jed Harmon. Jed was a man Tommy hadn't spoken to in nearly 6 years, a former drinking buddy, someone who had once worked private security for whatever paid the bills, including Crimson Collar, before their name meant what it did now. Back then it was just extra work, cash in a quiet envelope, no questions asked. But Tommy remembered one conversation, over cheap whiskey in the back of Jed's garage, when the man, loose-lipped and guilt-ridden, had mumbled something about a warehouse of pain. That phrase had stuck. Tommy tossed a few cans of dog food and a crowbar into the back seat of his truck, whistled softly to Bailey, and they headed out. Jed had lived alone in a worn-out ranch-style house at the edge of the forest line on Birch Hollow Road, a place too far out for mail and too forgotten for visitors. The road was mostly gravel now, washed out in sections, and moss crept up the edges of the old split-rail fence. Tommy parked near the fence, Bailey jumping down behind him. The yard was silent. No dog barking. No smoke from the chimney. Something wasn't right. He knocked twice, no answer. He tried again. Still nothing. Tommy circled around to the back door, the crowbar in hand. Bailey stayed by his side, his nose twitching, tail low. When Tommy jimmied the lock and pushed open the back door, it gave with a creak far too loud for an abandoned house. Inside, the air was stale. Mildew, dust, and the faint hint of bleach. The living room was still furnished, but messily. Papers strewn across a table, couch cushions flipped, a coffee mug cracked on the floor. There were no signs of a struggle, but the silence felt wrong, intentional. In the hallway, Tommy found a closet that had been barricaded with an overturned chair. He pried it open. Inside, a stack of boxes labeled in red marker. Inventory, transfers, 2019 to 2021. He pulled one free, flipping through the papers quickly. Most were dog profiles, photos stapled to the front, codes, weight, behavior notes, owner history, if there was one, price, and then he saw it. B19. The same number Bailey had been branded with. On the paper, male, golden retriever mix, approx, 3 months, initial aggression, low, tolerance, medium, training initiated, condition, recovering from leg fracture, expected transfer, June 7th. The photo was barely clear, but Tommy recognized the scared eyes. Bailey stood at the doorway behind him now, staring at the box as if it held ghosts. Tommy gathered the whole box and stood to leave, but a sound outside froze him. Crunching gravel. Footsteps. He crept to the window. A black SUV had pulled up, engine still running. 2 men got out, both in jeans and flannel, one tall and lanky with a ball cap pulled low, the other broader, with a thick beard and hands that stayed near his waistband too often for comfort. Tommy backed away, grabbed Bailey gently by the collar. No back door now. Only one shot. He moved to the side window and kicked out the screen. "Let's go," he whispered. Bailey leapt first. Tommy followed, crouching low. He slipped into the trees, heart thudding, never looking back. They didn't stop running until they reached the truck, parked around the bend behind an abandoned shed. He tossed the box in first, then Bailey, then peeled off down the road, the tires screaming over loose gravel. Only once they were safely 2 towns over did he allow himself to breathe. Back in Fairmill, Becca stood at the community center bulletin board, pinning a flyer for a missing Shih Tzu when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She opened the message. "Stay out of the Bailey mess. You're not ready to end up like him." Her hands trembled slightly. The phone almost slipped. She glanced around. The parking lot was empty. Just a gray sedan far across the street, engine off. The town had always felt safe, simple and quiet, the kind of place where you could leave your windows down and not worry. But now her heart pounded with a chill she couldn't shake. Still, she didn't delete the message. She screenshot it and forwarded it to Tommy. Then she dialed. "Tommy?" she asked when he picked up. "I've got something," he said. "Something big." "You okay?" "Not exactly, but I think I know why they want him back. I found the transfer papers." There was a pause. Becca's voice steadied. "I got a warning. Someone knows I'm involved." "I'm sorry," Tommy muttered. "No," she said. "Don't be. I knew what I was doing. I just didn't think it'd come so fast. They're watching everything." "I know," Becca exhaled. "So, what's the plan?" "I don't know yet," Tommy said, "but I've got a box full of ghosts in my passenger seat, and I'm not letting them win." The frost had finally lifted from the tips of the yellowing grass, and the last of Kentucky's hesitant spring was arriving, quiet and slow, like an apology for the bitter season before. Morning dew shimmered in streaks of pink light across Tommy's backyard, and a sleepy fog still clung to the tops of the fence rails. Tommy sat hunched over on the porch step in his navy work jacket, a chipped mug of coffee between his hands. The pages from Jed's box, those heavy ghosts of documentation and cruelty, were now sealed inside a toolbox beneath the floorboards, where his eyes didn't have to fall on them. His back ached more than usual, and the shotgun on his right never left his reach. But the silence around him felt softer today. Bailey padded out from the kitchen. The golden retriever was leaner now, no longer skeletal, though his gait still bore the memory of pain. The reddish scar around his right flank had begun to fade beneath a new coat of fur. His ears twitched as he stepped forward, no longer timid, just alert, and then he crossed the threshold into the morning light. Tommy didn't speak. Bailey walked straight into the grass, sniffed the dirt, stepped through a patch of sunlight. Then he looked back at Tommy and nodded, a single small dip of the head, almost imperceptible. But it was there. Tommy choked on the sip of coffee he had just taken. For a long second, all he could do was stare. Then, without realizing it, he chuckled. "You finally forgave me, huh?" Bailey gave no response, just sat at the edge of the yard, head high, tail calm, facing the open space as if to say, "This is mine now, too." Inside the house, on the kitchen counter, sat a small notebook with a deep green leather cover and a simple note inside. For you and Bailey. Write down what matters, what still makes the world worth staying in. Becca. Becca had left early that morning. Her contract with the rescue shelter had run out. She'd told Tommy at sunset the day before, standing under the porch light with her red scarf wrapped 3 times around her neck. Her green eyes had looked brighter than usual, but her voice had trembled when she said, "I think the story here's not about me anymore." Tommy hadn't said much in return. He never was good with goodbyes, but he had noticed the way she stood a little longer on the path, fingers trailing the wooden railing as if memorizing it. She hadn't looked back. Tommy placed the notebook on the table next to his old pencil sharpener and opened to the first page. The lines were clean. The paper smelled new. He wrote, March 27th. Bailey looked at me today like he understood. I don't know if I deserved it, but he did it anyway. He stared at the line for a moment, then added, maybe that's what love is. That afternoon, while sorting through the tools in his shed, Tommy received a visit from someone he hadn't seen in years. Elliot Granger, his younger brother by 5 years, stood near the gate with a shy grin and arms folded against his chest. Tall, broad-shouldered, with short-cropped dark hair and a jaw dusted in salt and pepper stubble, Elliot looked every bit the former firefighter he once was. Until you noticed the limp in his left leg and the way his right hand trembled faintly when he reached for the fence latch. "Thought I'd find you out here," Elliot said. "News travels weird ways through this town." Tommy wiped his hands on his jeans. "Didn't know you were still around." "I'm not," Elliot replied, then softened. "But I heard about a dog, and about a man with a gun who wouldn't let go." Tommy shrugged. "I ain't the hero they think I am." "I don't think they think that," Elliot said, stepping inside the yard. "I think they're scared, because you did something most people wouldn't. You stayed." Tommy led his brother toward the porch, where Bailey perked up from his spot. After a brief glance, Bailey walked slowly toward Elliot, gave him a once-over, then sat by Tommy's leg. Elliot crouched, wincing from his bad leg, and extended a hand. Bailey sniffed it, then placed his paw on Elliot's knee. Elliot smiled. "He's got some soul in him, huh?" Tommy nodded. "Yeah, got more than me most days." "Maybe that's why he found you." They sat in silence for a while. Tommy didn't ask why Elliot had vanished 5 years ago, and Elliot didn't ask why Tommy had shut the rest of the world out after their father died. Some questions were best left for other times. But when Elliot stood to leave, he placed a small card in Tommy's hand. "Guy I know, works with state investigators now. If you're going to take those people on, you'll need more than a crowbar and a dog with scars." Tommy glanced at the name, Jordan Kimball, Organized Crimes Division. That night, as crickets whispered in the grass and the stars blinked down with the comfort of things older than worry, Tommy wrote again. March 27th, late, Elliot came back. For the first time in a long time, someone sat on my porch and didn't try to leave me behind. Then he looked at Bailey, already asleep near the door, breathing softly. And beneath the words he wrote, "I think we're starting to matter again." The sky was heavy that evening, darker than usual, with no moon in sight. A low, pressing humidity hung in the air like a curtain of breath that refused to lift. Crickets, usually loud in the Kentucky dusk, were oddly silent, as if the world had collectively paused to listen for something far more sinister. Tommy sat at his kitchen table, with the window open just a crack, sipping stale coffee from a chipped mug. Bailey lay curled near the door, his ears twitching at every shift of wind. Tommy had felt it all day, the tension, the storm beneath the silence, and now it was here, settling into his bones. He didn't hear the first sound. Bailey did. In an instant, the dog was up, rigid, teeth slightly bared, eyes fixed on the back porch. Tommy followed his gaze. The porch light flickered once, then died. A shape moved across the yard. Tommy stood, his heartbeat climbing his ribs. He reached under the counter and pulled out the shotgun. The front door creaked slightly from a shift in wind, or perhaps something else. Then came a sound unmistakable in its wrongness, the soft squeak of window glass under pressure. Bailey growled low and deep. Tommy whispered, "Stay," but the dog was already crouching forward. The kitchen window shattered. Glass exploded inward in a burst of sparks from the motion sensor light. A dark figure tumbled through the frame, rolled, and lunged toward Tommy. Bailey was faster. The golden retriever hit the man square in the side, knocking him into the wall with a heavy thud. The intruder let out a sharp yell and swung a small metal pipe, catching Bailey in the ribs. Tommy screamed something unintelligible and fired the shotgun upward, a warning blast that tore a hole in the ceiling. The sound was enough. The man bolted back toward the window frame, but outside, blue and red lights painted the night. Deputy Sarah Linwood burst through the front door, gun raised. She was in her early 40s, tall and lean, with weathered skin the color of sand and sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. Her black hair was tied back in a tight braid, and her uniform was spotless, professional even under pressure. "Drop it! Down on the ground!" she shouted. The man froze, then tried to run. Another officer tackled him near the bushes. Bailey limped to Tommy, his body trembling but upright. Blood stained his flank. Sarah walked over quickly. "You all right, Mr. Granger?" Tommy nodded, not quite breathing yet. "Bailey, he stopped him." The other officer, a younger man named Kyle with freckles and an anxious jawline, handcuffed the suspect. "He's not local," Kyle muttered, frowning. "But his prints just flagged an alert in the cruiser. Looks like we got something bigger here." Sarah knelt beside Bailey, gently checking his side. "It's not deep," she said. "He's tougher than he looks." The suspect was dragged toward the cruiser. Tommy stepped forward, looked the man in the face. He was in his late 50s, built like a former athlete gone to seed. Close-cut gray hair, a crooked nose that had been broken more than once, and eyes devoid of any regret. There was a twisted insignia tattooed on his left wrist, 2 collars forming an X. Sarah looked at it and hissed through her teeth. "That's him. Jackson Flint, Crimson Collar's former lead trainer, disappeared when the raids happened 2 years ago. Feds put out a warrant, said he vanished with the last batch of dogs." Tommy stared. "He came for Bailey." "Yeah," Sarah nodded grimly. "He came to erase a witness." The police cleared out an hour later. Bailey was wrapped in a warm towel, lying on Tommy's couch with soft breathing and bandaged ribs. Tommy stood by the stove, trying to light the old burner to cook something that resembled dinner, but his hands were still trembling. Then there was a knock at the front door. He opened it slowly. Becca stood in the yellow porch light, rain dampening her long brown hair, a tote bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't smile. She just stepped forward, looked him in the eyes, and said, "I saw the scanner, heard it on the rescue channel. You okay?" Tommy swallowed. "We're alive. Is he all right?" He took a hit, but he stood his ground. Becca's hand brushed her hair back, revealing the slightest scar on her temple, a story she'd never told. She stepped inside. The room still smelled of gunpowder and blood, but her presence calmed it somehow. They sat down in the small kitchen. Tommy reheated some leftover stew, placed 2 bowls on the table. Becca took off her coat, revealing a navy sweater flecked with rain. She didn't speak for a while, neither did he. But they ate quietly, each bite slow, the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. When they were done, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small cloth pouch. Inside was a brass key. "To the rescue shelter's medical cage," she said softly, "if anything ever happens and you need a safe place. Or if you find another one like Bailey." Tommy took the key. "Thank you." Becca rose, ready to leave again, but hesitated. "I used to think it was about saving them. The animals, I mean. Now I'm starting to think, maybe it's about saving ourselves a little too." Tommy didn't answer. He didn't need to. Bailey lifted his head, gave the faintest wag of his tail, and rested it again on the cushion. Becca stepped outside, glanced back once. Tommy closed the door behind her. That night, under the flicker of the porch bulb, Tommy wrote in the green notebook, "April 2nd, they came for him, for Bailey, and he stood between me and death. A dog that barely knew trust a few weeks ago. What do I owe that kind of love? I don't know. Maybe everything." Becca came back tonight. She brought silence, but it was a silence that healed. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains in Tommy's kitchen, casting golden lines across the worn floorboards. Outside, the frost had finally released its grip on the soil, and the first shoots of green were emerging in the garden beds. Spring was coming, not just to the land, but to the house that had stood too long in silence. Tommy stood at the sink, coffee in hand, gazing out the window with a look that was no longer haunted, but quietly alive. Bailey sat near the back door, his fur clean and golden again. The bruises of past months faded into soft scars. He was 4 years old, fully grown, but still tentative around loud noises. His gait remained cautious on certain days, as if his body remembered pain even when his mind tried to forget. But his eyes, those deep amber eyes, now held peace. That afternoon, Tommy drove to the county shelter in his old Dodge pickup, Bailey in the passenger seat. The truck smelled of sawdust and dog biscuits, the radio playing a faded Johnny Cash tune. At the front desk, a young woman named Cassie greeted them. She was petite, with chestnut curls tucked into a low ponytail and freckles across her nose. Cheerful, but focused. "I've got the paperwork ready for you, Mr. Granger," she said. "All we need is your signature." Tommy hesitated for a moment before signing the final line. Cassie smiled. "That's it. Bailey's officially yours." He looked down at the dog sitting calmly beside him, tail thumping softly against the floor. "No, I'm his." Back home, the changes were subtle but real. The broken garden fence was rebuilt with reused planks Tommy had salvaged from a neighbor's barn. Weeds were pulled and marigolds planted. Becca had brought them by in a crate with a note that simply read, "For defense and color." The old wooden bench under the tree was cleaned, restained, and repositioned to face westward, where the sun dipped low behind the ridge each evening. It was on that bench that Tommy now spent his afternoons, Bailey curled beside him, ears occasionally perking at the chirps of sparrows or the rustle of wind. It was on one such evening that Becca returned, not just to visit, but to share an idea. She wore a yellow rain jacket and jeans spotted with dog hair, her hands calloused from lifting crates and food bags. There was a new energy about her, the kind that came from purpose found. "I'm starting something," she said, brushing stray strands of hair behind her ear. "A group. For people like you. Well, us. Seniors. Vets. Anyone who's alone and could use a little love. And maybe a dog who needs the same." Tommy raised an eyebrow. "You got a name for this crew?" She grinned. "Old souls and soft paws." He chuckled. "That's terrible." "Exactly why it'll work." They sat on the bench as Bailey rested his head on Tommy's foot. "We're going to host a meet and greet next week at the community center," Becca said. "Want to come? Just talk. Maybe share your story. I think it'd help others." Tommy didn't answer right away. His fingers traced the grain of the benchwood, remembering the first night Bailey had crawled into his lap, trembling. "I've never been much for sharing." "That's the point," Becca replied. "You don't have to be much, just enough." The town's community center was a squat brick building near the library, its windows clouded from decades of baked summer air and winter condensation. Tommy hadn't been there in years. He wore his only decent jacket, a corduroy tan thing with elbow patches, and brought Bailey on a soft harness. The moment they walked in, a wave of warmth washed over them, people smiling, folding chairs in a circle, a table of cookies, and 3 other dogs sniffing the corners with cautious curiosity. Becca had arranged it well. She welcomed everyone with a gentle clap and introduced herself before passing the attention to the room. Most people were hesitant. A man named Glenn, missing part of his left leg, talked about a stray tabby he fed. A widow named June cried softly as she spoke of the dog her children took away when they moved her into assisted living. When it came to Tommy's turn, he stood slowly, cleared his throat. "I found him outside my place," he said. "No name, hurt. Could have looked the other way. Didn't." Bailey looked up at him. "I thought I was doing him a favor, saving him. But maybe he saved me too. When you're old, you don't expect much anymore. A quiet house, some coffee, and not too many regrets. But then this damn dog comes and starts barking at every fence post like it's a ghost." There was soft laughter. "And suddenly the silence is too loud again. So I started writing. Little things. Not poems, just memories. I forgot how many I had. And I realized some of them were waiting to be told. Maybe that's why he came." He sat back down. The room was still for a beat. Then someone clapped. Then another. And suddenly the whole room echoed with it. That evening, back home, Tommy opened the notebook Becca had left him weeks ago. The pages were half filled now, some with shaky handwriting, others with sketches of Bailey in various poses. He turned to the last blank page and wrote, "Today I spoke, out loud, in a room full of people, and I didn't die. Bailey wagged his tail when I was done. That was enough. Maybe this is home now, not the walls, but the breath between them. Maybe this is what peace sounds like. He closed the book and stepped outside. The sun was falling over the mountains, casting long orange streaks across the sky. Bailey trotted beside him, then sat, facing the horizon. Tommy joined him on the bench. No words, just warmth. As the sun dipped fully behind the hills, Bailey leaned gently against Tommy's side and exhaled, a sound that seemed to carry every wound, every scar, into the wind. And for the first time in years, Tommy smiled. Not from relief or habit, but from something softer. Something like home. Sometimes, miracles don't come with trumpets or light from the heavens. Sometimes, they arrive with muddy paws, broken trust, and a quiet gaze that says, "I'm still here." In a world that rushes and forgets, a forgotten man and a forgotten dog found each other and reminded us that healing can begin with the smallest yes. That even the most broken can become whole again, not because we earn it, but because grace finds a way. Just like Tommy and Bailey, maybe what you're looking for has already found you. All you have to do is open the door. May God bless all the hearts still waiting, still hurting, still searching. May He guide your steps like He guided theirs. Through the silence, through the shadows, into the light of home. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment to let us know which moment moved you most. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of hope, healing, and the incredible bond between animals and the humans they save. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that love never comes too late. And may the Lord bless you and keep you. May He make His face shine upon you and give you peace. Amen.